In this photo, we see a man dressed in a white suit standing inside of an ancient tomb. He's brushing off dirt with a paintbrush, carefully uncovering something buried deep within. What he found was so remarkable that some believe it may have been cursed, doomed to bring misfortune upon anyone who disturbed its eternal slumber. The year was 1922, and the discovery would shock the world. But what exactly did he find? And what terrible curse has come to be associated with his discovery? Hi, everyone! Today, we're going to talk about one of the most famous archaeological discoveries of all time, and the legend that has sprung up around it. Some call it the Curse of the Pharaohs. Others refer to it simply as the Curse of the Tomb. But what exactly is it, and is there any evidence that such a thing really exists? Let's begin at the beginning. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the British were obsessed with excavating and exploring ancient Egyptian tombs. By 1910, they had excavated over 60 tombs and discovered many artifacts that are now some of the most recognizable pieces of Egyptian history, such as Tutankhamun's death mask. However, by 1922, Egyptologists began to think that the best discoveries had already been made and that nothing new could be found. That was until Howard Carter stepped onto the scene. Carter was a relatively unknown Egyptologist at the time, but soon his name would become forever linked to the legends of the Curse of the Pharaohs. The story goes that Carter discovered the entrance to an unknown tomb on November 4th, 1922. After 3 weeks of carefully clearing away dirt, he finally uncovered the entrance to the tomb of Tut, one of the most famous and infamous pharaohs of all time. You may have heard of him before, but who was he? Tutankhamun became pharaoh at the age of 9, likely at the behest of his father, Akhenaten, who wished to reform Egyptian religion and make Aten, the sun disk, the only god of Egypt. After Akhenaten, the throne likely passed to Tutankhamun's mother, Queen Ankhesenamun. Whether she wanted to be pharaoh herself, or if she simply wanted someone to rule in her son's place, is not known. But she may have even ruled alongside Tutankhamun. During his reign, the old gods of Egypt were brought back, and the empire was returned to its former glory. At just 18 years old, he died and was replaced by his advisors, Horemheb. We don't know exactly how he died, but it is thought that it may have been due to malaria or perhaps a broken leg that became infected. Carter's discovery of the tomb itself was quite remarkable, mostly because it was virtually intact. Most tombs had been looted in antiquity, but this one had somehow managed to remain undiscovered. Of course, there was a catch. As soon as the first explorers entered the tomb, strange things began to happen. The first expedition consisted of 8 people, including Carter himself. Within a few months, 5 of them were dead. One of the men, a friend of Carter named Mea Birch, had gone home for Christmas. While walking outside, he slipped and fell, striking his head on the pavement. He never regained consciousness and died. Upon hearing of his friend's death, Carter reportedly said, "I do wish the curse stories would stop." Unfortunately, it seemed that they weren't going to. One of the other excavators, a wealthy aristocrat named Lord Carnarvon, experienced even worse fate. On April 5th, 1923, Carnarvon was taking a bath when he was bitten by a mosquito. The bite quickly became infected and turned into a serious wound. It appeared as though it might heal, but then it started to turn black, and it was clear that Carnarvon had contracted blood poisoning. Just before his death, he reportedly called out for his valet and told him to please don't let me die. But his pleas went unanswered as he died from the infection. To this day, reports claim that his heart stopped beating at the same moment that Carter was dusting off an ancient statue inside the tomb. And this was far from the end of the bizarre misfortunes that seemed to plague the dig. Within a few years, 2 more people had died under mysterious circumstances, and rumor began to spread that the tomb was cursed. The story caught the attention of the public, and newspapers across the globe picked it up. Before long, millions of people were reading sensationalized stories about the curse of the pharaohs and how anyone who disturbed their eternal rest would be met with terrible consequences. The curse became known as the Curse of Tutankhamun, even though he wasn't the first pharaoh whose tomb was excavated. But it was the most famous, and therefore the story stuck. But is there any evidence that the curse is real? First, it should be noted that many of the supposed victims of the curse died of natural causes. For example, one woman who was involved in the excavation suffered a heart attack. She was 72 years old, a heavy smoker, and had a history of heart problems. Another person who died was a reporter for the Times of London who was covering the story of the excavations. He died of a heart attack at the age of 56. While these deaths may seem suspicious, they can easily be explained by natural causes. Of course, other deaths are more suspicious, such as Lord Carnarvon, but scientists have theorized that his infection may have been caused by bacteria that had been sealed in the tomb for thousands of years, but which were released as a result of the excavation. There are also a number of fungi that produce toxins, and it is possible that the air inside the tomb could have become poisonous for those inside. Finally, it should be noted that the human body produces methane gas, especially when decaying. If the tomb was poorly ventilated, then it could have easily led to suffocation. In fact, there were a number of times during the excavation that the workers reported headaches and nausea, which could have been caused by toxic gases. Even if there is a perfectly rational explanation for all of these deaths, there's still the question of why so many people died. Was it mere coincidence, or was there something more at work? Archaeologists studying the legend have speculated that the tales of the curse may have been an attempt by the Egyptians to protect their sacred burial sites from looters. After all, no one wants to disturb a tomb if they believe that they'll be cursed for all of eternity. Another theory is that the stories developed after the fact to drum up publicity and get more visitors to the site, thus bringing in more money. It's impossible to know for sure, but both of these theories have merit. What we do know is that the stories of the curse exploded in popularity thanks to a series of books written by a man named Dorothy E. S. Blake. Blake published several novels featuring the curse of the pharaohs, and the idea caught the public's imagination. Before long, Hollywood had picked it up and made a film about it. The Mummy, released in 1999, starring Brendan Fraser, is probably the most famous movie about the curse of the pharaohs. And while it's certainly entertaining, it's important to remember that it's just a movie. It's not based on reality. However, that hasn't stopped people from believing in the curse. In fact, every time a major news story comes out about King Tutankhamun, the story of the curse is recycled and published once again. And why wouldn't it? People love a good mystery, and there's just something about the idea of being cursed for all of eternity that captures our imaginations. So what do you think? Is there really a curse on King Tutankhamun's tomb? Or is it all just a myth? You decide. But before you go, be sure to leave us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the curse. And while you're at it, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching. Bye.